you so much for joining me today. Lily Jo here, founder of the Lily Jo Project, an organisation devoted to providing educational resources to prevent mental ill health. Now, for those of you who've never heard of me before and my work before, I've always had a passion for working with young people, and I started my career working at a council youth club, making toast in a park pavilion for teenagers. I qualified as a counsellor and I spent 5 years working in the NHS. And then after having my second child, I decided to pursue a career in music, performing my music at festivals and in schools up and down the UK. And one particular moment stood out to me when a young Year 9 girl handed me her razor blades that she had with her in school and said, "I don't want to cut myself anymore." And for me, that was a catalyst to take all of my counselling knowledge and pop it onto a website so more people could access help and support for their mental health. So now we use music as the key to help children and young people remember positive messages to improve their mental health. And 7 years on, we offer workshops in schools, online resources, and my latest venture is my brand new book, which is called Talking to Children About Mental Health. Now, in terms of housekeeping, this session should be around 30 to 40 minutes in length, and because you've signed up, a recording of the session will come to your inbox tomorrow. So if you enjoy the workshop, please feel free to share the recording with anyone who you think it might benefit. Now, I decided to use YouTube as the platform for this workshop, so please feel free to write any comments or thoughts in the chat box, and I'll try and get to them as and when I can. My passion is to give you resources in order to equip and empower you and to be the best parent, the best teacher, the best caregiver that you can possibly be. So if you want to drop me an email during or after this session, feel free to email me, lilyjo@thelilyjoproject.com. All right, so let's get started then. Now, I started to write my book in 2020, and as a project, we carried out our own surveys and research with the young people that we were connected to. And we found that the biggest problems our young people were facing were the following: loneliness and life lived online, including social media, anxiety and cancel culture, pandemic pressure and post-pandemic stress, self-harm and low self-esteem, climate anxiety, global grief, and mental health and being LGBT+. Now today I wanted to focus on some of the things I discuss in chapter 2 and chapter 3 of my book, which are anxiety and post-pandemic stress. And just to set the record straight, I believe we all have physical health, we all have spiritual health, and we all have mental health. And our mental health can be good, it can be mediocre, or we can struggle with our mental health. And it's estimated that currently 1 in 6 young people struggle with their mental health and 1 in 4 adults. Now, from the research we carried out, we found that anxiety is one of the biggest mental health problems facing Gen Z today. Gen Z being those born between the years 1997 to 2012. Gen Alpha are the generation just below this. Nearly half of all people in the UK have experienced anxiety and panic attacks, and young people are 17% more likely than any other age group. This rose to 20% in 2020, and the largest contributing factor to anxiety actually relates to academic achievement, so it's all around school. Research shows that students will be students for longer than any previous generation. And another anxiety-inducing issue is cancel culture. The fear of getting something wrong and being cancelled for it. If someone cancels someone, then they will write about them negatively online, refusing to endorse them or purchase products associated with them. And this could happen to a young person for a multitude of reasons. For example, I describe in my book my 13-year-old son wearing the wrong coat. And the term cancel culture, that emerged back in 2017 as a way to describe public outcry over an individual's unacceptable behaviour. Now, unfortunately, I have personally experienced cancel culture on a relatively small scale. A couple of years ago, I opened Instagram to find that someone had set up a fan account, and I was surprised and humbled to see it. I clicked on the app while on the bus to a venue with my team, and I had a lovely conversation with the person who was running the account. Now, they'd seen me perform, they loved my work, and so they created this kind of tribute to me online. I was astonished, and the feeling of being seen and recognised was gratifying. I got off the bus, I went into the venue that I was working at, and I hadn't realised that I'd been sent a message from the fan account that I hadn't responded to. I was obviously busy. 20 minutes later, I checked Instagram again, and the fan account was now a hate account. I hadn't responded to the message, and the creator had taken serious offence. They renamed the account to express their dislike of me, complete with skull and dagger emojis. And I was shocked at first, and then I was actually pretty afraid. It had only taken 20 minutes, but it was enough time for me to understand the very fickle nature of our online presence. I'd gone from being celebrated to being cancelled by someone. My anxiety was not only that someone had used vivid and alarming images to express their sudden, violent dislike of me, but also what such public cancellation would do to my online presence, my career, and ultimately my life. Now, for many young people today, cancel culture is a part of how they protest about injustice. When speaking with my young friend Morgan, they explained, "We are more of a community. A lot more of us understand about mental health. If we see a person who is acting terribly, we'll call them out. Previous generations don't seem to do that, and we want to stand up and support the victim, even if that means ganging up on the offender." For young people like Morgan, their online life gives them more control over the world. They know that cancelling people has an impact on their ability to do their job or live well. They understand the power of the cancel. But it can also have an adverse effect on the cancellers. However, they're anxious about being cancelled themselves. So it's kind of like a vicious circle. Another huge problem our young people face today is cyberbullying. Gen Z value digital privacy and being anonymous, and they're less likely to post photos of themselves. So, for instance, a trend that I've seen in my own life, while my own Facebook and Instagram are littered with photos of friends and my family, my nieces and my nephews never post anything personal on TikTok. Gen Z are, and likely the generation coming afterwards will be as well, aware of the impact of messing up online. Cyberbullying is not worse than normal bullying. The impact of bullying is always detrimental to self-esteem and mental health, whether it happens online or whether it happens in person, at school or at home. The difficulty with cyberbullying is that it has the potential to never stop. As long as a young person has a phone connected to the internet, they can receive negative messages from their anonymous abuser 24/7. During the pandemic, when children and young people were spending even more time online than usual, studies show that there was a 70% rise in hate speech, cyberbullying, between children and young people during online chats, and a 40% increase in toxicity on popular gaming platforms such as Discord. That's a stunningly high increase, and it's because it's easy to be cruel when you literally don't have to face the consequences of your actions. So, how do we begin to help? What can we do as parents and caregivers to alleviate the pressures of anxiety and cancel culture within our classrooms and at home. So one thing that I think can help is to create safe spaces. So as adults, I believe we need to create circumstances and spaces in which those things can't arise. This is what I call a safe space. So creating safe spaces doesn't have to involve whole rooms. They could potentially be moments in the day. So perhaps on the drive to and from school or going for a walk, you might have to set a no phone zone for those spaces to help children or young people in your care to understand that they then have the space to open up. There needs to be spaces where they can just be themselves, where they're not connected to their devices. So for example, in my home, we have a safe space at the dinner table. Now, obviously, we're not perfect. Not every night of the week do we even eat dinner together. But when we do, it is a no phone free zone at the table. And this creates a safety zone, a place where myself and my children can talk without being buzzed or beeped or harassed by the people in their world. So maybe just take a minute to think now, if you don't already, where could your safe space be? Maybe within your classroom, or where could your safe space be at home? Where could a no phone zone work for you, where your children and your young people have the space to just be without the pressure of being cancelled, feeling like they could be cancelled, or being abused and spoken badly of? The next thing we can do to help our children and young people is for us to change lacking language to listening language. Now, when we use listening language, we show our children and young people that we're not only hearing them, but we're also understanding them. When they reveal their anxiety about an online comment or what other people might think of them, we can choose to respond with listening language or lacking language. So lacking language is language that is lacking in the care children and young people need. So let's use the example of my son. So he bought his own coat, saved up for it, it cost a lot of money, and because someone said something mean about it, he decided he was never going to wear it again. Now, obviously, as an adult, that seems ridiculous to me. But examples of lacking language in response to that might be, don't worry, what people say doesn't matter. You're being silly. It doesn't matter what people think of you. You shouldn't listen to them. All such responses have the potential to come across as untrue, dismissive, blaming, or just lacking in perspective. Examples of listening language might be, can you explain why you think that? What do you worry people might say about you? How does that make you feel? Nothing anyone could say would change my opinion of you. These responses have the potential instead to engage the child in your care into a conversation about how they actually feel. When they feel heard, when they feel understood, it's much more likely that their anxiety levels will reduce. Now, in my book, Talking to Children About Mental Health, I have loads more tools to help combat anxiety. Now, obviously, we don't have time this lunchtime to go through them all because I want to touch on the second important topic, which is post-pandemic stress. So 3 years ago, almost to the day, our lives looked very different. We were in the early stages of the first lockdown, an unprecedented time, with the word unprecedented giving me the shivers. Now, the scariest thing about the pandemic that I found was how it snatched away my control over my circumstances, and it left me personally feeling lost. Research tells us that Gen Z and Gen Alpha felt the same, and it has had a detrimental impact on their mental health. A staggering 48% of Gen Z feel that COVID-19 has had an extreme or substantial impact on their life. Their top emotional response to the pandemic was anxiety at 49%. A Young Minds report on mental health during the pandemic in UK schools, featuring Gen Z and Gen Alpha respondents, revealed that 83% of them agreed that the pandemic was making their mental health worse. Key factors that were cited by young people included health concerns about friends and family, changes to structures at school or university, and the loss of social interaction. In a survey conducted by the Office for National Statistics, 41% of parents reported that they felt the well-being of their child or young person in their care was negatively affected by trying to continue their education at home. Post-pandemic stress disorder, also called post-COVID disorder, is not yet an officially recognised mental health condition. What is known so far is that the pandemic has been shown to be traumatic by psychological studies, and 4 different groups of people have been identified as experiencing high levels of post-traumatic stress disorder in the aftermath of the pandemic. Now, they include those who had COVID-19 or a near-death experience with COVID-19. Family members or key workers who witnessed the near-death experience or death of someone with COVID-19. Those who learn of the near-death experience or death of a family member or friend due to the virus. And those who witnessed the devastation of the pandemic firsthand on the front lines. For example, hospital staff, key workers, medical examiners, journalists and more. Now, people in those groups are exhibiting the symptoms of PTSD. However, researchers are also looking into how the pandemic has affected the mental health of the general population. They're looking at the impact of what they call vicarious traumatization, which is what we might think of as secondhand trauma. Now, that is a particularly relevant concept in relation to the experiences of young people. Some of the signs that children in your care might be struggling include denial. Young people exhibiting denial may refuse to acknowledge their turbulent feelings. They may seem numb and often shut down discussions about emotion with phrases such as, "I'm fine" or "nothing's wrong." They may also struggle to be physically affectionate. It is also possible that they may turn into a whirling dervish of energy and become obsessed with keeping busy. The second thing is blaming. Young people who are showing blame may either blame someone else or themselves for the event. If young people are struggling with self-blame, they may begin to show symptoms of hypervigilance. That is, being overly cautious or controlling of their surroundings in an attempt to offset the guilt, fear, and responsibility that they feel. They may also express a lack of trust in the adults around them, which is symptomatic of a belief that they need to fix everything, that everything is their responsibility. The third thing is social withdrawal. So young people who are socially withdrawing will often suddenly become disinterested in social events and settings that used to bring them joy, such as clubs, spending time with friends, etc. They may also carefully avoid any situations that remind them of the trauma and seem to trust their friends and those who care for them less than they did before. Disengagement. When young people are disengaged, they may struggle to cope with any situations that, for whatever reason, remind them of the trauma. Consequently, they may have sudden strange reactions to problematic situations or emergencies. That is because they are overwhelmed by trying to process the trauma and cannot cope with anything more on top. It may be something as simple as a change of schedule. For instance, a different person is picking them up from school, or something more directly associative. If a grandparent was lost to COVID, for example, they may have sudden reactions to anything that reminds them of that grandparent. And lastly, physical symptoms of anxiety. These young people may experience flashbacks to the emotions related to the trauma and feel as though it was happening to them all over again in that same moment. They may experience distressing nightmares or pain, nausea, sweating or trembling. And I know recently one of my children has been saying, "Oh, that just reminds me of lockdown," or "I've just had a moment where I feel like I'm in lockdown again." And they're remembering those feelings. So, what can we do as parents, teachers, caregivers to help our children and young people? The first thing we can do is try to manage excessive worry. So worry can be debilitating for a child or young person. To be fair, worry can be debilitating for an adult. What can help is to consider some interrupting negativity techniques. And one that I use with my clients is called worry time. So in worry time, I encourage clients to set aside 10 minutes of the day when they are allowed to worry as much as they want and write down every single worrying thought that they might have. So they can bullet point their worries one by one. Once they've done that, I ask them to cross out any worries that they can't control and write down as many solutions as possible to the worries that they can control. Once the timer is up, they can put aside their worry journal and are no longer allowed to worry about those things. So if a certain worry pops up in the day, they can think, that's something I'm going to look at later on in worry time. It's not for now, it's for later. And that's where they can compartmentalise. Another idea is creating a worry box together, especially for younger children. So this is a box that you can keep in a shared space and that children can at any point post into the box a worry that they have written down on a piece of paper. You can then set aside a certain time in the day or week, depending on how often the child needs it, to open the box and discuss the worries inside. That allows the children a set time to express their worries. So both of these techniques, worry time and creating a worry box, utilise a common PTSD management technique, which is called boxing. Boxing a negative or damaging experience away inside the mind so that it has less of an impact on everyday functioning is particularly suitable if a child or young person is continually overwhelmed by their worries. It's also important to remember that the feelings cannot be boxed away indefinitely. It's essential to make time and space for the worries to be addressed and discussed so that the child or young person has that space to recover. Another thing we can do as parents and caregivers is to manage withdrawing. So when a young person is expressing the need for safety, it's important not to force them to do so otherwise. For example, if a child is using their bedroom as a place to withdraw to, allow them the time and space to do that. Now, as a parent, I know how difficult that can be to acknowledge and accept, especially when you miss your child and can feel them pulling away from you. But if we fight this, we're telling the child or young person that they're not permitted access to a space in which they feel safe, and so they must endure spaces where they feel less safe. An exercise that you can try with your child is verbal grounding. A child or young person who feels emotionally unsafe needs reassurance regarding the things that they would usually take for granted. So it's important to reinforce feelings of safety. So saying things verbally such as, "Mum and Dad will always do everything we can to keep you safe." Now that may just seem obvious, but they acknowledge and respond to the emotional insecurity the child or young person is currently experiencing. Other phrases might include, "Our house is a safe place." So it might seem obvious, but saying those things to verbally ground your child is important when they are struggling. Another exercise that you can try is physical grounding. So when a child or young person feels emotionally unsafe, they're often experiencing the emotional needs of their much younger selves more vividly than usual. So a 10-year-old who normally doesn't like much physical affection may suddenly be much more open to hugs and cuddles and holding hands. And that's because they're unsure as to how to process this strange new threat emotionally. So they may revert to their earlier childhood needs and responses. A 3 or 4-year-old needs physical affection to feel safe and protected from the world. So it is likely that an older child or young person who feels emotionally unsafe could experience that need again too. As I mentioned earlier, there are more tools and more tips within my book, Talking to Children About Mental Health, on this subject of post-pandemic stress disorder. And in my book, at the end of each chapter, I ask you, as the parent and caregiver, to self-reflect. And this is to improve your mental health. So perhaps a takeaway exercise from this workshop could be to ask yourself the following question. How would you characterise how the pandemic has affected your life? It's important that as caregivers, we get help too. And it's exhausting, in particular, caring for someone who is anxious and struggling with anxiety or PTSD. And especially if you're struggling yourself too. So at the Lily Jo Project, you'll find tons of free resources and free tools that you can access to help you begin to help yourself. Your school or the school that your children go to can also be a really good source of information and help, as well as the GP practice that you're registered with. So please do not suffer in silence. Do not suffer on your own. Make sure that you are getting the correct help and support that you need so that you can support your children and young people in the most effective way. So if you're noticing your child or young person is more withdrawn than usual, having angry outbursts, struggling with sleep disturbances, nightmares, that kind of thing, or perhaps they're more teary than usual, this could be a chance for you to then press the alarm bell and to understand and notice that something isn't quite right. Making sure that you are kind to your own mind, practicing good self-care, nurturing yourself and parenting yourself is also key. So tomorrow or later on today, I'll send you some follow-up links that can help you to help yourself. I've got a self-care webinar in particular that I think could be really useful for you. So that kind of brings us towards the end of our session today. If you want to know more about the unique challenges facing Gen Z and Gen Alpha, you can get a copy of my book, Talking to Children About Mental Health, from the lilyjoproject.com/book. Perhaps we can pop that in the chat for you as well now. It's available on Amazon, WH Smith, Waterstones, and lots of other online retailers. It's been designed knowing that you are busy, and so it's practical and easy to read. You can take it along to your child's physical activity like along the sidelines of the football pitch, or if your kids are into basketball like mine, while you're sitting on the sidelines, or you can read a chapter or two in your lunch break. It's lovely and easy to read, and it's not too thick. So thank you so much for tuning in to today's webinar. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that you found it useful and that it can add some value to your life. And I am going to stick around now for a couple of minutes. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, you can pop them in the chat box and I'll do my very best to answer them for you.
You are unstoppable. This is for the guys who've been chasing stars. Moving on to love the hills. Nothing's impossible. You are unstoppable. Nothing can stop you now. The haters.
The lesson was amazing. I've never, ever, ever in my time as a teacher felt energy like that in a room. Like, honestly, ever. It is probably the best assembly I've ever been to. It was engaging, it was interactive, the kids got so much out of it. We are so, so grateful. Thank you.
It was super high energy, which was great. It really got all of the children involved. Yeah, it spread a really great message that we can now sort of reiterate in our PSHE lessons as well. So really loved having you guys in.
The sessions were absolutely brilliant, really inspiring and high energy. The children loved it. Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, both really engaged throughout. Really clear message about mental health, and the children definitely went away with lots of tools and ideas. And we're looking forward to exploring the online resources as well. Thank you so much.
We had a brilliant morning with Michael and Pete from the Lily Jo project. The children really, really enjoyed the session and engaged with it brilliantly. It was such a fun way of exploring a really important topic. And the children I know are going to access the Lily Joe Project website, and hopefully it will really help them maintain good mental health.
I'd definitely recommend it to other schools and to friends and to teachers. Absolutely.
I would certainly recommend these guys to come and visit their schools, and I would recommend it to my friends to access the website as well, and the resources on there, which are incredibly child-friendly, relevant, fun and topical for them.
I would absolutely recommend the Lily Joe Project to anyone I know in education and anyone that needs some kind of support and I guess a new direction with mental health and wellbeing. It is an unbelievably incredible initiative, and we are so grateful for the opportunity to work with you. So thank you.
If our in-person workshops or our online learning platform sounds like something that could support your school community, please do drop us a line, admin@thelilyjoeproject.com. Can't wait to hear from you.
I can hear you, I can see you.